Jim Leonhard is the Bills' new defensive coordinator, and I am fired up about it. I'll tell you why and what it means for the Bills' current defensive players today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Well, folks, welcome in a double dip Saturday. 2 episodes of Locked On Bills here on this Saturday, but we got to do it. The Bills hired a new defensive coordinator, and it's Jim Leonhard, and I got to say stuff about this. I'm excited about this one. This came through, and I was feeling pretty good, and so I'm excited to tell you why I'm so excited about Jim Leonhard right now. So who is he? Well, he's the Bills' new defensive coordinator. He's 43 years old. He played his college football at Wisconsin. He was a safety, and he was a walk-on back in the early 2000s and wind up being a 3-time first-team All-Big Ten safety, recorded 21 interceptions, the most in Wisconsin history, also a very good punt returner for the Badgers. But he winds up being a 2005 undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin by the Buffalo Bills. That's the first team he played for in the NFL. And for as good of a college player as he was, and eventually a very good pro player, he didn't get drafted. And that's because he's 5'8", 190 pounds with sub 30-inch arms and ran a 4.63. So short, lacks length, not very explosive in terms of speed, but that didn't stop him from having a 10-year career in the NFL where he played in 142 games with 73 starts. And he's a fun football player to watch. Quickly became a fan favorite in Buffalo. Gritty, smart, not big, not fast, but he just made plays because he was a super smart football player that played with a ton of energy. And he came to life playing for Rex Ryan. And I have a lot of criticism for Rex Ryan, the head coach. Rex Ryan, the defensive coordinator, did a good job, and he ran a very complex defense, and Jim Leonhard really shined in that complex scheme. And so he played in the NFL for 10 years, stopped playing in 2014, and then he went back to Wisconsin in 2016 to be their defensive backs coach. Then in 2017, he became the defensive coordinator and was their defensive coordinator 2017 through 2022. And in fact, he was the interim head coach in 2022 for 7 games as well. Then in 2023, he became a senior football analyst for Illinois. And then he entered the NFL back in 2024 as a coach. The Broncos under Vance Joseph hired him to be their defensive backs coach and passing game coordinator for defense. Then this past year, he was also the passing game coordinator for the defense, but Sean Payton made him his assistant head coach, and now he finds himself as the Bills' defensive coordinator. So how good were those defenses in Wisconsin under Jim Leonhard? Well, let me tell you, and this is courtesy of Eric Turner of Cover One, who put this on X. So Jim Leonhard, Wisconsin defensive coordinator, 2017 through 2022. Over that span, relative to all of the FBS college football, it's 119 teams or whatever it is in FBS football, they were number 1 in yards per game, number 2 in first downs allowed per game, number 2 in third down defense, number 2 in interception rate, number 3 in pass yards per game, number 4 in rush yards per game, number 4 in red zone defense, number 3 in yards per rush, number 6 in yards per play, and number 8 in sack rate. They were dominant. They were absolutely dominant in the Big Ten for a long stretch under Jim Leonhard. And then, of course, he's been part of 2 terrific Denver Broncos defense over the last 2 seasons with Vance Joseph. Of course, we know they're good against everyone except for the Bills, but good news, they don't have to play the Bills, right? Jim Leonhard gets to coach on the Bills. But those defenses were really good. And despite really uneven quarterback play from Bo Nix, both as a rookie and this past year, that defense carried them. And Patrick Surtain was the defensive player of the year in 2024, while Jim Leonhard was the defensive passing game coordinator. And of course, that defense was outstanding again this past season. Folks, I'm excited. I am really excited about this. And that's for a number of reasons. First of all, because I really love Jim Leonhard. I've been a big fan of him for a long time. In fact, let me tell you this. I do another podcast, Locked On NFL Scouting, with Kyle Krabs. And several years ago, we did a summer project on the podcast where we pretended like there was an expansion team entering the NFL. And so we went through this process of building an expansion roster and picking a coaching staff and all those types of things. Our head coach was Jim Leonhard. This was years ago for our, make it up type thing. Just kind of had a fun summer project. We picked Jim Leonhard to be the head coach. So you can bet I'm pretty excited about him being the defensive coordinator for the Bills. So first of all, I love Jim Leonhard. Been a fan for a long time. This also represents massive, 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 massive change for this Bills defense. I mean, honestly, flush so much of what you've come to learn about the Bills defense under Sean McDermott, because it's going to be a lot different. The positional archetypes, super different, especially at linebacker, at D tackle, and on the edge. The fronts, the type of fronts the Bills will run under Jim Leonhard, super different. The coverage shells, super different. A lot more man coverage. A lot more odd front. A lot more downhill ability from your second level. And yes, this will represent a scheme change. It will be mostly a 3-4. Now, I'm careful to say that it will be a 3-4 because it's very multiple. If you've watched Jim Leonhard's defenses throughout the years at Wisconsin, or, of course, you kind of think about what they did the last couple of years in Denver, it's very multiple. And I don't want you to let your mind wander to the Bill Belichick style of 3-4, where there's a big nose tackle like Vince Wilfork in the middle, and then there's these, Ty Warren, Richard Seymour 5 techniques. That's not the style. There's variations of 3-4s. And this is more of an attack-oriented, almost like a penetration style odd front defense. And so just be careful to not assume everything you've always assumed about 3-4 defenses watching New England or watching Pittsburgh, that this is what you're getting. It's very different. And so I'm very excited for how this is going to transform stylistically how the Bills play defense, because I think it's really necessary. Really necessary. And so let me say this, because in the next segment, I want to talk about the outlook for the Bills' current defensive personnel. I want to go through really almost all of the roster on the defensive side of the football and kind of talk about where everyone fits, who doesn't fit, and what they're going to need. All right. But for as much happiness and excitement as I think there has been about this hire in the few hours since it's been released, there's been some commentary about how this is an inexperienced defensive coordinator, and Joe Brady maybe needed someone with some more experience at defensive coordinator. All right, let's talk about that. So Joe Brady, first-time head coach. Pete Carmichael is his offensive coordinator, who is unbelievably experienced. His special teams coordinator is Jeff Rodgers, who's unbelievably experienced in that job. Jim Leonhard, I guess it's his first time as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. He called that Wisconsin defense at a high level for 6 years and has had a huge role in Denver for the last 2, including the assistant head coach this past year while being the defensive pass game coordinator. I don't know. I don't find myself really concerned about that. Did you have to go with Raheem Morris just because he's more experienced when you like Jim Leonhard better? I think about the Jaguars this year. Liam Cohen, really, really inexperienced. Less experienced than Joe Brady, for sure. He hired Anthony Campanelli to be their defensive coordinator. Turned out great. That was the toast of the league. Remember the mighty, mighty Jaguars entering the postseason. You heard all about how good they were. That's because they legitimately cranked it up offensively and defensively under a first-time head coach and a first-time defensive coordinator and a play-calling, offensive-minded head coach. I don't know. I can't really get myself to panic about that piece. That just feels like a talking point that we're throwing out because, well, it's in reality a first-time head coach with a first-time defensive coordinator. I don't know. I think there's some more to it. There's tons of experience. Like right now we look at this staff as Joe Brady, Pete Carmichael, Jim Leonhard, Jeff Rodgers, and then Pat Meyer as the offensive line coach. There's tons of experience there. Tons. And so let's see this whole thing come together. I think he's made his most important hires, your O-line coach and your 3 coordinators. There's a ton of work to do to fill out the rest of the assistants. And I'm excited to see how it comes together. But I think it's really short-sighted to just say that, oh, it's a first-time NFL defensive coordinator with a first-time NFL head coach. I don't know. I think there's more to it. I think Joe Brady supported himself with the offensive coordinator piece. And, Jim Leonhard's got a heck of a resume, despite never being a defensive play caller in the NFL. He's got plenty of experience. I don't find myself super worried about that. All right. One of the big questions about this is, how's it going to work with the defensive personnel? So we'll go through it and talk about some of the ideas that I have next. So folks, be sure to stick with me. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. It's last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's a perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from the kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5, and you're going to get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone, I go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, welcome back, folks. I know a lot of people are thinking about personnel defensively. How is this going to work with what they have? What do they need to figure this out under Jim Leonhard? Well, first of all, it's Jim Leonhard's job to make the personnel work, right, with his scheme. It can't be the other way around. You can't say, hey, this is my scheme. Let's make all these players fit into it. No, that's not how it works. You got to make the players you have fit into your scheme and or build the scheme around your players. And I trust Jim Leonhard will do that. So I don't think it's as big of a lift as a lot of people do. It's definitely different. There's going to be some things they'll need. But here's what I'll say. Regardless of whether or not Sean McDermott was back as a head coach and everything was the same, they were still going to need to do a lot of stuff on defense. You still needed a starting nose tackle, a starting defensive end, a starting linebacker, a starting safety, depth. Like, you still needed a bunch of stuff. All right. So regardless of what needed to happen here or what did happen here, there was always going to need to be some additions to this defense. So we'll talk about the front first, the D line. So you're going to have a nose tackle. You're going to have a 4-eye. Okay. A 4-eye is a defensive lineman that lines up on the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. So we talk about the 3 technique, who lines up on the outside shoulder of the guard. A 4-eye lines up on the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. So you're talking about just one step further outside. You're also going to have your 5 technique, which is a position where you play head up over the tackle. And, typically the Bills have that on the weak side of the formation. And so that's a pretty normal position. There's a little bit different responsibilities in this defense, but that's kind of what you're looking for. You're going to have your 4-eyes, your 5 tech, your nose tackle up front. So when I think about that 4-eye position and across the NFL, maybe these are some names that you can think about that play this type of role. With the Broncos, think about Zach Allen, Kobe Turner with the Rams, Braden Fiske with the Rams, Aaron Donald when he was with the Rams. That's what he did. They played odd front defense. Osa Digizua with the Cowboys. Some names there to kind of get your mind spinning. This is where Ed Oliver and TJ Sanders are likely to play. And this is me. Look, I'm forecasting the best I can based on what I know about Jim Leonhard and the roles on the defense and what the Bills have. So I think this is where you really utilize Ed Oliver, you utilize TJ Sanders, maybe Landon Jackson, maybe Greg Rousseau. I think a little bit more of Greg Rousseau and Landon Jackson as 5 techs, where throughout the league you see a John Franklin Myers, you see a DeMarcus Lawrence fill those types of roles. And I think that's pretty clean for Greg Rousseau and maybe Landon Jackson. Landon Jackson needs a lot of work, so I got to figure him out a little bit more. But, the Bills are looking at expiring contracts for Joey Bosa and AJ Epinesa. I don't think you're going to bring either of those players back, so you might need a little bit more here, right? But I do like the idea of Oliver as a 4-eye, TJ Sanders as a 4-eye, Greg Rousseau kind of maybe a 4-eye, 5 tech, maybe even an outside linebacker hybrid type player. At the nose, again, this isn't your Vince Wilfork, Ted Washington type player. Think Keanu Benton with the Steelers. Think DJ Jones with the Denver Broncos. I think Deion Walker's fairly clean projection here. I think Deion Walker is also a guy that you can play in some wider alignments out towards that 4-eye type position. And I think that'll be pretty clean. I think a little bit about Dwayne Carter here. But also like Daquan Jones, an expiring contract. A younger Daquan Jones would be kind of perfect for this type of role. And I don't know if he'll be back or not or what the plan is, but that's the type of nose tackle that you're looking for, not just a big, huge guy that can't move. Got to have some penetration skills, some lateral movement. And so I think you have Deion Walker. I think you might have Dwayne Carter, but you're probably going to have to add here. You're going to need a little bit more of a traditional type player here that can anchor and play that nose tackle position. So you're going to need more, right? You're always going to need more regardless of what the scheme was going to look like. On the edge, you kind of have those rush outside linebackers. Think Nick Benito. Think Nick Herbig. Alex Highsmith. Andrew Van Ginkel. Those types of players. And this is really where the cupboard's kind of bare for the Bills. Now, this is a much cleaner projection for a guy like Javon Solomon. So we'll see how that goes. Like maybe that will help. Michael Hoyt, when he's healthy and ready to go, that'll be a perfect role for him. He'll be great at that. Now, when's he going to be ready to go? Achilles tear, 9 months recovery, right? I'm sure he'll work his butt off and get back as quick as he can. Maybe you can use a little Dorian Williams here, but this is where you're going to need to invest. One of your premium investments this offseason, whether that's a high draft pick, a trade, a free agent move, you're going to need some speed rush off the edge. That's going to be an important part of what the Bills need. And it's kind of fun. I've started to look at some of the free agency lists, and now with this style of defense on the menu, it really changes a lot of the players that I would look at in the past and be like, no, that's not really going to be a fit. And now they are. I think it opens up the menu quite a bit more. But you're going to need that speed rush, that burst, bend, flexibility off the edge from that rush outside linebacker position. Again, Michael Hoyt will help you a ton there. Maybe Javon Solomon, maybe Dorian Williams, but you're going to need more here. At inside linebacker, the Bills obviously have Terrel Bernard. I'm certainly hopeful for him to get healthy and be a lot better. Now, this is the type of defense that he played in college under Dave Aranda at Baylor. He's not a thumper, right? But my favorite thing about Terrel Bernard when I watched him at Baylor was him as a blitzer. And Bernard should get a lot of chances to do that in this defense. And so I think he can help you a little bit there, but you're going to need more. Obviously, Dorian Williams can factor in here, but with expiring contracts like Shaq Thompson and Matt Milano, those guys aren't really going to be fits for this type of defense. I don't expect either player to be back. I will say this. This is great news for Joe Andreessen. Great news. I mean, this is his language. This is exactly the type of role that would work well for Joe Andreessen as like a 3-4 inside linebacker. So I am not sleeping on what this can mean for him. But you're going to need some more thump here. You're going to need some more versatility with these linebackers in this type of defense. They got to be able to blitz. They need to be able to play downhill firmly, but you also got to cover a little bit too. And so this is an area where the Bills are going to have to invest and get another answer. I mean, maybe it will be Joe Andreessen, but I think you need some real competition here at inside linebacker. At corner, Bills are going to be fine. Christian Benford, Max Harrison, versatile pieces that can play man and zone. And here's the thing, like when we say that you're going to play a lot more man coverage, the most aggressive teams in the league in terms of man coverage play like 35-40%. Every defense is still primarily a zone defense. So just make sure you're aware of that when we talk about they're going to play more man coverage. I'm talking about like a 35 to 40% rate. You're still mostly going to be zone because that's the way the league is. But Benford and Harrison are a great pair of corners that excite me a ton. For this style of defense, you'll need some more depth, obviously. In the slot, this is a question mark, but it was always a question mark. Can Taron Johnson find himself a little bit, or is he just kind of on the decline? I'm concerned it's more that he's on the decline, but maybe this can reinvigorate him in some ways. Maybe Jordan Hancock fits in here, but this is a spot where the Bills are going to have to find an answer for sure. They were always going to have to find an answer. And then at safety, this will be great for Cole Bishop. Super fired up for what this means for Cole Bishop. But you're going to need a running mate, and you're always going to need a running mate regardless. And maybe that's Jordan Hancock. I'm not really expecting it to be Taylor Rapp. I think he might just be worn down, and the Bills have a cap-saving opportunity for moving on from him. But, I think you will need to find that running mate for Cole Bishop. So you got work to do here. You've had work to do here, no matter what you did with this defense. Some names, like very quickly, that intrigue me as possibilities. Just after quickly looking at some free agent lists and guys that have connections to Jim Leonhard, safety PJ Locke in Denver has been there for a number of years. Spot started a few games here and there. I thought he's looked good. And, maybe he brings some familiarity that can be the running mate to Bishop. I'd be interested there. At linebacker, Leo Chenal played for Leonhard at Wisconsin. Alex Singleton, who has been a good backer for the Broncos. He's 33, so I don't know if he's a long-term answer, but familiarity, expiring contracts. Jack Sanborn, who was a good backer for him at Wisconsin. He's a free agent. So those are some names that maybe they can look to get that thumping type player at linebacker. I don't mean a slug. I'm not talking like Brandon Spikes. All you do is just run into people downhill. Like you got to have some skill. But those types of backers will kind of fit. So those are some names. There's a whole lot more. I mean, you look at Caleb on Chason, you look at Dennis Gardeck. Not that there's like one-for-one familiarity, but those types of players are now possibilities for the Bills. So this opens up a lot, and it opens up a lot for us to talk about. So glad we had this initial conversation about Jim Leonhard. We have so much more to do and kind of unpacking this and thinking about some of these possibilities. And it's fun now. We've got our coordinator set. And I did, if you're if you're joining me now, keep in mind I did an episode earlier today on Pete Carmichael and Jeff Rogers if you're looking for that commentary as well. So this really sets the deck, right? We can really start to talk about how players fit, what they need to get, and learning more about this vision for the Buffalo Bills under Joe Brady. And so I'm excited. I really am. I like how this is coming together. I think for all the people that had an initial reaction to Joe Brady being the hire and said that's nothing is changing, I feel like that was always a very disingenuous thought. And as this staff is assembled, I think it's more and more pretty clear that everything is changing. I know Joe Brady remains, but in a different role. Defense is going to be brand new. I think this offense is going to take on a different life that's more Sean Payton oriented. And I think that's pretty clear based on Joe Brady affirming, hey, I'm from the Sean Payton tree, and then hiring Pete Carmichael, who's been Sean Payton's right-hand man for the last 20 years. And so, and one thing I can appreciate about Joe Brady is I've tried to listen to every word he said. Like, he's been on so many different, outlets over the last few days, and I'm still trying to watch them all. He's been very open. He said, this offense has to evolve. It has to evolve. We have to get better on offense. And so I think that's a good acknowledgement, and I'm excited to see how it comes together. It feels good. It feels good right now, and I'm excited to see this whole thing come together. So there you have it. Jim Leonhard, Bills defensive coordinator. Oh, boy, that I won't say that made my day, because it's a snow day here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're probably at least 6 inches into this thing. We're supposed to get 8 to 10 inches, and so I had a fun time outside playing with my daughter. We went there's a berm down the street. We went and sled down that for a little bit earlier today, and it was a really fun time. We don't get a lot of snow, and since my daughter's been born, she just turned 6. We haven't had any meaningful snow here in Charlotte, so we had an absolute blast. So I won't say it made my day, because my goodness, it doesn't come close to having that fun that I had with my daughter earlier. But in terms of Bill stuff, boy, ask my wife what happened when I saw this come through on my phone. I was pretty excited, and I'm excited to have shared some initial thoughts with you here today, and I'm excited to share even more with you in the coming days. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.